Hi there, this is Maryal Concepcion, your host of the My DPC Story podcast. Have you or someone you care about ever been burned by the U.S. healthcare system? If so, you are listening to the right video, because if you are listening, chances are the answer is yes. But the U.S. spends so much on healthcare. Why are so many Americans affected personally and especially financially by the healthcare system? Shouldn't that mean we have better healthcare access and treatment options? Shouldn't it be easy for us to be able to see our doctor when we need to instead of turning to the ER or urgent care? Historically, it's been seemingly impossible to answer these questions. But now that is changing through the direct primary care movement. This video that you have tuned into will bring you into the world of direct primary care and show you how physicians all over the country are changing the way they practice so patients from all backgrounds get the high quality care they need and deserve, which makes for both happy patients and physicians. Learn even more by subscribing to the My DPC Story YouTube channel. Find us on all major podcast platforms. Find us on socials at My DPC Story and at mydpcstory.com. There you can find resources including how to find a DPC doctor near you, conferences about DPC, DPC startup guides and advice, a store with DPC swag, and even a mapper showing where podcast guests are practicing. Thanks for tuning in to hear about this powerful movement. Now, on to the episode. Direct primary care is an innovative, alternative path to insurance-driven healthcare. Typically, a patient pays their doctor a low monthly membership and, in return, builds a lasting relationship with their doctor and has their doctor available at their fingertips. Welcome to the My DPC Story podcast, where each week you will hear the ever-so-relatable stories shared by physicians who have chosen to practice medicine in their individual communities through the direct primary care model. I'm your host, Maryal Concepcion, family physician, DPC owner, and former fee-for-service doctor. I hope you enjoy today's episode and come away feeling inspired about the future of patient care, direct primary care. Direct primary care is allowing me to take the knowledge and the passion I have for family medicine and turn it into this living, breathing clinic where I am able to experience autonomy, entrepreneurship, camaraderie, and the thrill of doing medicine the way I have always wanted to. I am Dr. Maryal Concepcion of Big Trees MD, and this is My DPC Story.
A Sacramento native, Dr. Maryal Concepcion is a Filipinx creator and connector. She attended the University of California at Davis, where she graduated in 2005 with a double major in Anthropology and Evolution Ecology. She had an unforgettable time as a California transplant when she got her MD at Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska, where she discovered her love of rural family medicine. Her residency training was in the unopposed family medicine program at Doctors Medical Center, Modesto, a training extension through the UC Davis Medical School. During her time in training, she returned to Superior, Nebraska to complete proficiency training in performing colonoscopies as part of her rural family medicine concentration. After residency, she moved to Arnold, California, a rural town of 4,000 in the Stanislaus National Forest located in Northern California, where she worked under the fee-for-service model with her husband, Dr. Jeremiah Fillo, also a family practice physician, doing full-scope care for over 5 years. Though grateful for her experience in this role, she was driven to seek a better way of life and a desire to practice insurance-free medicine. That was when she discovered DPC. In September of 2021, she became the CEO and wearer of all the hats at Big Trees MD, the first direct primary care practice in Arnold. Her clinic was designed as a telemedicine and home visit model without a brick and mortar space. She is also the founder and the host of this podcast, My DPC Story, the award-winning podcast that educates and inspires bi-weekly featuring DPC and direct care physicians. But the title she is most proud of is being a mama to Asher and Nolan, her two ridiculously awesome and cuddly boys. Welcome to your own podcast, Maryal. You don't know how many woot woots I wanted to give every time I heard Nebraska.
I switched out of red last minute because I was wearing my Huskers sweatshirt today in preparation for our interview.
I would have changed too after they lost on Friday, so no worries. I will not hold that against you.
That's awesome.
Well, I think it's reasonable. It's your own podcast. You have built this with your own two hands before you even built your own DPC. You really have drove your passion for direct primary care actually through this podcast, rejuvenated and rebuilt yourself from the traditional medical world that kind of brought you down and broke you down before you amped up and went live. I think you're probably one of the smartest of us because you went in and got all these tidbits live and didn't just read it all, right? And so I think one of the bigger things would be to let us know what even made you pick medicine to begin with, because we know you're great at podcasting and you're going to have a great DPC. But what really drove you to go into the field of medicine?
It's such a different experience being on the opposite side of the microphone. So I really appreciate that question. And thank you so much for those kind words. When I was 23, at the time, I was kicked off of my parents' insurance. And so I, going to UC Davis, was still getting a assigned physician by my insurance in Sacramento. So I went to a healthcare center where I was shocked because I had gone to traditional, in office complexes, but this clinic was located in a trailer. And so I went to South Sacramento, which is where I grew up, but I went to this trailer and I walked in and it was a trailer that I could describe as probably out of the 70s, very worn furniture. You could see the shelves of files had been well worn in terms of the folders had been torn, and it was just a very dingy sort of environment. And the person who I assumed was the nurse brought me back to this exam room and she said, "Go ahead, have a seat on the table." And there was this man, he was probably in his 80s, and he was sitting there in the what we would consider a patient chair or a family chair within the same room. I was sitting on the exam table. And the man was wearing this blue jacket. I can remember it so vividly. And he had a wrist brace on his right hand that was actively grabbing jelly beans off the counter and putting them into his mouth. And I said, "Oh, I guess this is the waiting room. Like maybe they didn't have a waiting room, so they use this exam room as a waiting room." The door closes. And then my delayed response is, "Oh my goodness, is that the doctor?" And the only reason I had gone to this clinic was because I needed a refill on my albuterol. And so I needed to see my primary for a prescription. And so the man proceeds to put jelly beans into his mouth, look at me over his rimmed glasses, and said to me, "How many children have you had?" And I said, "I am here for my asthma inhaler. I've had asthma," went to explain my history of asthma. And I think that my subconscious has blocked out the rest of that visit because I remember I did get a prescription. I was extremely uncomfortable. I was extremely dumbfounded at that this person was a practicing physician. At the time, I was at Davis considering whether or not I was going to do physical therapy because my second cousin, has Down syndrome. And so I watched his success through occupational music, physical and speech therapies. And so I was very much passionate about physical therapy, at-home physical therapy. I was doing rotations in that. I was dabbling at the genetics clinic at Shriners in Sacramento. But that experience was what drove me to say, wow, I'm going to be a doctor now, and I'm never going to be that doctor.
Yeah. And I don't know if I will ever look at jelly beans the same after that story. Honestly, because I'm sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, this guy was just sitting there shoving his mouth full of candy like it was just hanging out at the daycare. It's just odd to me that there was no professionalism in that whatsoever. And I think that it's amazing that we, even as direct primary care physicians, think that's odd because not that we're not professional, but I think we're a very laid back group. But that's what I really enjoy about us is that we're a laid back group. We want a very personal relationship, but it doesn't have to be in a non-professional setting. And we actually want a very welcoming environment in these like home situations or brick and mortar spots or wherever it is. And that, unfortunately, what you experienced, I have a feeling happens more often than one might think. And I I am very impressed that you decided instead, let's do above and beyond and do better. There's patients everywhere that literally have not been to a doctor in years because they've had an experience similar to yours, and then they just don't go at all.
Yeah. And it's very true. And that's actually something that I have learned speaking with physicians who've been on the podcast. Like Dr. Delicia Haynes shared an atrocious experience she had that helped imprint upon her desire to be the physician she is today because of choosing not to act like the person she had seen for care. And it's just, when you talk about this idea that we are more relaxed, I feel that is the core of the relationship-based medicine that we bring to the table as DPC physicians, because we know people over time. And so with people over time, it's like you learn a sense of trust. And so that absolutely brings professionalism, because we bring our best selves to the table as a physician, as a professional, but also as somebody who cares, who legitimately cares for each and every individual we take care of. They are not numbers to us. These are people who have entrusted us, have invested in us, and we show up every day for them. When you and I were speaking before the interview started, one of the things that I had brought out, because I'm amongst the DPC paraphernalia and books and such that I've grown to love and cherish. But one of the things that I was looking at was back in 2019, when I attended my very first DPC summit, the HINT Summit in San Francisco, Eric Miller from Paladina had talked about this idea of DPC and Disney. And so he had mentioned that courtesy is held in a greater regard than efficiency. And I loved that he talked about measuring how you improve and not how you impress. After talking to people through the podcast, I feel that my experience was a whirlwind when I opened. And so I love that when I focus on how do I improve what I'm doing all the time, that my patients really feel that. And they love when I ask them, like, how was your experience? How can we do it better? And they know that I'm building this so that it can be better in the future. So that was one quote that I loved that goes back to the relationship core of direct primary care.
And there is no doubt that I know you will achieve that, because just a quick sidestep here about the HINT Summit in 2019. That is where we were chatting about this earlier, that I had the luxury of meeting you. And it wasn't the best interpretation of San Francisco. That wasn't ideal of how the streets of San Francisco looked. But I will tell you, my shock and awe of everything I saw in San Francisco when I walked into HINT. I was there as a little Nebraska gal that didn't know anybody. My husband traveled with me, but didn't come to the conference. And honestly sat down, and you were one of the first people I met. And just your enthusiasm then, and you weren't even open yet. And all you really had to do was just flash this big old smile. And honestly, that alone is what makes people feel comfortable. That, along with the courtesy and the patient care and asking about their experiences and improving upon it. But the warmth of your smile and just knowing that you are dead set on trying to make that experience what it needs to be. I totally believe that in you. And I'm sure when your patients see you, they feel that way too. But the conferences in general, nuts and bolts, or the masterminds, it doesn't matter which one you go to, but they're so important to go and learn, because you not only get to meet people like you do on your DPC podcast, but you get to see them in person and feel their energy and just their passion. And honestly, I think that's what fills a lot of our buckets. And maybe that's why I was sitting here at the beginning of our call saying, oh, I just don't know how we're going to get through this COVID mess, because I do feel like we get a lot of our energy from each other. I really do.
Yeah. If there's nothing like it, there's literally nothing like it. Just maybe a week ago, before this interview, you and I were virtually sitting next to each other at the DPC Alliance immersive Zoom call. And I was so excited. I was just like, I'm sitting next to Amber. And it was so nerdy. But I literally was like,
I have to say, that really was like top-notch nerdiness, because I have never ever watch a screen. And I'm like, oh, she really is sitting next to me. Like virtually, we're sitting at a table. This is the best. That's what happens when you are a solo entrepreneur and your education comes from Zoom conferences instead of being in person. But that's all right. I'll take that newness. Yeah.
Hopefully next year we will all be able to see each other in person. And yeah, one of the things that I do value about the conferences that are put on centering around DPC are that they are so focused on getting DPC doctors and DPC like-minded people together. And so if you haven't, I know that there's definitely been people who I speak with on Facebook or who have been on the podcast who have not had that opportunity. I definitely encourage people to go to whatever event you can, whether it be local, whether it be across the country. But there is nothing like being in a room with other DPC.
Yeah, I totally agree. So that is the best part of CME, I would say, for sure. Well, let me ask you a few things that I think are really important. Running my practice right now, 3 to almost 4 years out, completely different ground set than where you are right now. And I really enjoyed looking through your website, seeing all the new little touches and colors and variations and all these things you've done to make it very appealing. And there's some things that you've done that maybe you've even worked through in your head. Do I do this? Do I not? But I think right now in just the peak, I hope it's the peak and we're going down after this, but COVID, I've really seen just an upturn in how many people call and access us for acute needs and even primary care prevention because they don't want to get ill. It has increased the amount of visits that I would have ever thought. And our dues just some days I don't feel like are enough. But I do like how you've taken your membership per month and broke it down between families and individuals and OB care. So how did you come up with some of those things and what made you want to really individualize them versus just a regular tiered pricing?
Yeah, great questions. So I think that when I looked at my practice that I had been in fee for service, and I looked at what would my dream clinic be in DPC, I wanted to maintain the full scope care. And while I don't deliver babies, I love taking care of mamas and I love taking care of their newborns just because, and you and I both know this, we send pictures of our children to each other and we're like, who is that teenager? Because that teenager was just born in April of last year. And this idea that I can have a practice built out that is supportive of people from cradle to grave and the ability to provide that access at an affordable price was really what I was looking at as the main driver behind my pricing. When it came to the tiers for individuals, I do feel that in my practice that I was in, that my people who are 65 and older definitely had more chronic care issues. And so I felt that in my community, having a tiered structure where children were cheaper and the pricing went up as a person aged was very appropriate for my area. With regards to offering non-member services, so like you mentioned, the OB services, so I will provide at-home OB care for mamas, whether they're my patients or not, because I know how hard it is to get into any clinic, especially if you're a mom. And if you're a mom with other children, I know now after having more than one, how hellish of a situation it is to be pregnant, to be wearing shoes with hobbit feet and not wanting to step on them and having to then toss your child into a car seat while they're kicking and screaming because they don't want to get in the car. And so I said, you know what? I could totally offer.
That would never
not
happen.
That ever happened. I legit have pictures of the hobbit feet though, like no joke. But I thought to myself, hey, if I'm offering OB care, this would, one, be a great way for moms to get care at home. And two, for moms to be introduced to the type of care that I'm bringing to this community. And so that was where I incorporated some of those non-member options.
You have your mom up to 28 weeks. Isn't that right? 28 weeks is what your maternity.
And the reason, the reason I have the 28 weeks is because in my practice, the OBs locally prefer to have moms transfer care at 28 weeks. But because of COVID, I've been much more able to talk with the OBs and still do I do my point of care ultrasound of mom, do the fundal height to get the heart rate and whatnot, and do those checks and urine checks beyond 28 weeks, but they'll have already established at 28 weeks. So I can still maintain their care, but they don't have to do as much of it with the OB after 28 weeks because of the pandemic.
Yeah. So you're talking a lot about this, your analysis and your point of care ultrasound, and how are you managing all of this outside of your brick and mortar space and doing this at someone else's home that hopefully they've cleaned up a little bit for you and there's at least a kitchen table that's clean, but we know how postpartum life goes. Maybe that might not be the case. Are you bringing anything with you so you can really function and still be, like we were talking about, professional and do your job so you don't get distracted? Because sometimes squirrels are everywhere. We just are one spot to another.
So when you say squirrel, that represents my mind. And so I'm an Apple product user. I absolutely freaked out in a good way when they created that focus mode for iOS 15. Everything is on focus mode at all times. And so I only get notifications from Spruce. My phone only rings from Spruce when I have an urgent call and my husband can get through. That's it. And so when I switched to focus mode, my Facebook notifications, my Instagram notifications, the things that were really making me squirrel really got cut out, which I was so grateful for. When you talk about how do I maintain professionalism while going to a person's house? Okay.
Yeah, because you're talking about, okay, I'm going to make this easy for mom and I'm going to let her kids run around and be in their environment. But now you've just stepped up your game of really needing to focus, and because now you're out of your comfort zone.
Yeah. And I will say that I am always thinking about being on brand when I am thinking about anything with regards to my clinic. So my brand is like, you go to my website and you can see that I'm like greens and peaches and pinkish and turquoise.
I really love it. It's very natural. And honestly, you're a very natural person. Obviously, you had me tricked. I thought that was you hiking on the profile picture on that front page. But I do think it would be hard to focus. And I really loved how you started this with, I'm always thinking about my brand. Yeah. So that's ideal, no matter if you're in a brick and mortar or if you're at a home. So how do you do that out there? You're wearing peach every day? Or what?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I do have a huge smile because I have all of my scrub tops embroidered. They say Dr. Concepcion, Big Trees MD. No matter who it is, even if it's my patients who I've known for 6 years and they know both kids, they've stuck with me past maternity leaves and all these things, they are paying for a relationship, but also that professionalism like you're talking about. And so I will dress the same for all of my patients, no matter how comfortable I am with them or how new they are to me. But literally, we live at 4,000 feet in the Stanislaus National Forest. And so we live amongst trees. There are people who moved up here for the outdoors specifically. And so my colors represent this idea that this is not Alice and Janney talking about what Kaiser's selling. This is a grassroots clinic that I created based on my love of the movement and my knowledge of what to do as a physician. So one of the things that I want to put in here is my cousin. She is a graphics designer. She told me about the color wheel and about how the color wheel can play with emotions. And I chose colors based on our discussion there. And the other thing that I will drop here because we're talking about the website is
what probably made your little hint lady know who you were marketing towards because of the colors you chose.
Stay with us. We'll be right back. My DPC story just hit 100,000 downloads on Apple Podcasts alone, and we could not have done it without our amazing listeners. So to thank you and to celebrate this milestone, we're giving away an incredible DPC Summit prize package for the DPC Summit happening in Minneapolis this summer. The prize includes My DPC Story swag, and on top of that, the prize also includes a ticket to the DPC Summit. Check out my interview with Dr. Jeff Davenport, where you'll hear more details about the summit. To be eligible for this giveaway, all you have to do is first rate and review My DPC Story on your podcast listening platform. Pro tip, if you rate My DPC Story with a 5-star review, it helps the visibility of the podcast and it helps others to find all these DPC stories. Number 2, Take a screenshot of your review and email it to support@mydpcstory.com. You'll find that email in the show notes as well. And third, make sure you're following My DPC Story on all your social media platforms: Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter. All the social links are at the bottom of mydpcstory.com and also in our show notes. For bonus points, share both this episode and the My DPC Story posts about the DPC Summit with your community. The winner will be announced in a future episode, so make sure you tune in to find out if you'll be heading to the summit. If you've already purchased your ticket and you're the winner, My DPC Story will send you a check for the price of your ticket. Thank you for listening to My DPC Story, and best of luck.
So what Amber's talking about is I did one of the website walkthroughs with Lauren Tancredi at Hint Health. And she immediately said, "Oh, your target audience is families and females." And I was like, yes, like that is definitely who I most commonly see. The other thing too is that generationally up here, there definitely are a lot of people who are older who love numbers, and rather than texting, they like a number to call. So my cousin had suggested put your phone number right at the top of your page. So if they don't see anything, they at least know the number to call. And the way I have my link set up is that you can press the number on a smartphone as a link and it responds as a phone call. And so that's definitely helped with, that's definitely helped with leads. But that was another thing that Lauren said, like, that's genius. That's to have your number easily accessible and not hidden in the contact section means that you want to be contacted. And I was like, yep, that was my cousin Alex. Thanks.
Thanks, cousin.
Yeah,
that's good. I like that. And that's honestly one of the ways too that you'll grow your panel is accessibility. That is one thing to think about as you're growing. Right now, we're having a serious growing pain after adding our PA, because we already had quite a bit of phone calls, because we very much push phone calls as well. We like to just, like we were talking about earlier, you and I, about texting, like we like to talk to the patient and get it done with. That's checked off. And somebody's not lingering out there or may be pushed into the next day. But as you grow and you get more patients, that means more calls, right? And we've been functioning this whole time off one line. And right now we're at the growing pain of everybody is telling us that they can't reach us. So now we're having to revert and work backwards and start saying, okay, if the line is busy or you can't get through, then text us or email us, after years of training them that they should reach out and call us to have urgent access. And so I do think having that accessibility on your website turned right into a number is exactly how you're going to capture that patient that is impulsive, right? Or squirrely. They're like, okay, I need to do this right now, or I need a visit right now. And they push it and it links right to you. Yeah. That's you.
And my patients know when they join the practice that because I use Spruce, their voicemails are transcribed. We make that very apparent in multiple ways, so that when they know, and it definitely is a little bit, it's awkward at the beginning when they suspect that it's going to be days before they get a response back. But their voicemails are transcribed, so I can read them even if I'm with a patient or whatnot to figure out, is this something acute? So the other day I had this example, like right before Thanksgiving, a patient texted and they left a voicemail saying that they had a urinary tract issue. And then they called the acute line, and I picked it up because that's what I do. And I paused my patient visit at the time, and I was like, hey, I did get your transcription. This is definitely something that we're going to take care of. I will call you back in 30 minutes. Is that okay? And so they said yes. And then when I jumped on to the phone call again with this patient later, I said, you did the absolute right thing. And I encouraged that behavior of, hey, you called the correct line. This definitely is not something where you are about to jump in the car to go to urgent care. So you called the right line. You did the right thing. You can trust now that when you leave a voicemail, it will be received. And that it's definitely key. And I actually love the fact that multiple people can call the line at the same time, and it all just gets funneled into separate conversations as text to us. So we're able, when I say we, I have virtual assistants that I work with as well as myself, and we're able to triage quicker because we can read things.
Now, speak a little bit, especially for, people that are Atlas users like myself. Where do those transcribed texts go to? Do they go into your EMR? Do they come into an email at the end of the day to you? How do those show up in patient charts for you?
That's a great question. So I am on Servo for my EMR, and then I use Spruce for my communication. I toyed with the idea of the Twilio integration, but for me, Spruce had what I needed more in terms of addressing my patients' needs and my community's needs. When a person texts in Spruce, we will continue the conversation in the EMR. There is no integration other than copying and pasting, but a couple of things on that. Dr. Niti Kapoor of Devoted Family Medicine in North Carolina had given me the brilliant advice of if it takes more than 2 lines, you have to go to the EMR. So I value my patient portal immensely. For my community, it is one of my selling factors in that I have a portal that is useful and is so streamlined for my patients to use. So they feel secure in if they have something like a rash picture to text me or a cut to see if I can manage or something like that, and it takes more than 2 lines of text, they will put all their medical issues in the portal. And so if a person is trying to do a conversation over text, we'll remind them, hey, go ahead and send us a portal message so we're able to address it more effectively there. Mm-hmm. But in Spruce, it's mostly like people reaching out for procedures from the community, like circumcisions, or people saying, hey, I got my echo scheduled, or, things like that.
So very interesting going back to your comment on your acute line. What made you set up an acute line versus just one line? Tell me what your thoughts were when you were going through that, especially since you're solo and you are going to get most of those messages anyways, and you can only triage them as fast as you can triage them. So what made you pick 2 separate lines?
Great question. So when I signed up for my Spruce line, I have more than one user because I work with virtual assistants. And so I don't pay extra for my doctor's line, quote unquote. I loved the accessibility feature of an acute line, especially because of the rural location that we're in. So the nearest urgent care is 30 minutes away. The nearest urgent care is only open certain days of the week and only certain times. And so when I was reading on Nextdoor, I will read it for market research in my own community to see people are really wanting after hours care, weekend care, holiday care. And so for the acute line, I say, if you are going to go to the urgent care and it's a non-life-threatening emergency, please let me know, because I would be more than happy to help you out at your greatest time of need, because that is compounding the value of my clinic. Now, I don't envision myself taking 700 patients. My cap ideally right now is 300. And I have gotten the one acute call that was about the urinary tract issue because that patient didn't know which line to choose. And so I feel that my patients right now are very respectful of the fact that I have a family. Then they're very respectful of calling, but they love knowing that they can reach me if they need to.
Okay. So would you say on an acute care situation where you're going to their house, give me an idea, talking a little bit about your roller bags or your accessories. That's a lot of different sutures you could take, or some hemostats, or maybe even some tegaderms. What are you hauling all this stuff in? And what are you taking?
So great question. I actually did inventory last night, so I can really answer this question. I'm definitely buying things as I need them, but at the same time, I have my basic things. So to get started, through McKesson, I bought 10 laceration trays. I bought sterile gloves. I bought lidocaine. I bought things that I would use for any 4Os, 5Os type of sutures. So those are things that I know that I will use, whether it be an acute situation or whether it be a regular situation, like I'm doing a biopsy for a person's mole or something. When you mention IVs, I'm not doing IVs yet. I definitely would say that's my goal when I go to Blair and you teach me how to do IVs. After that point, I will do IVs because we have extremely limited access, not only to healthcare, but also to COVID vaccination and testing. And so for vaccination, especially for kids, people have to drive 45 plus minutes as the only mobile clinic being able to do these vaccines. Our public health department doesn't have the staff to run clinics. Wow. And I have this gargantuan caboodles case.
I was just going to say it. I was going to say caboodle because when I heard about your mobile vaccine, I was like, oh man, she has a peach caboodle. I'm pretty sure I had a peach caboodle.
Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah, it's that's why we're sisters from different misters. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely the reason. So this thing is probably 20 inches tall, and it is like maybe 2+ feet wide. And then depth wise, it's probably like a foot. So I have it right now stocked for vaccinations. And so I have my sharps container, my gloves, my masks for people who don't have them, who need to come up to me to get vaccines. I have the stuff to mix the Pfizer vaccine for kids. I have the Band-Aids that I got from the Johnson bundles that they send every month, which are amazing. And then I have my Buzzy Bee and my shot blocker and my garbage bag for garbage. And so those are things that I have ready to go. So I literally am like a mobile vaccination clinic. And on Vistaprint, because they had their Black Friday sale, when I do my vaccination clinic or clinics, I will also have a pop-up banner, like a retractable, like 8-foot banner or something like that, that talks about my clinic with a QR code, so that if people are interested in the fact that I offer family practice services and they need same or next day care, that's like the main advertisement on my banner. They can learn more about the practice as I'm doing something, as well as using that to screen. I did a vaccine clinic for kids. I was so mortified that all of these children were waiting and watching the children before them get vaccinated. I was like, okay, so I'm going to use my banner for not only branding, but also
for privacy.
The children. Yeah, it was totally like, I'm going to change it and do it this way when I do the clinics. That is how I have set up for a vaccine clinic. So long answer there. For my main kit, so I roll with a Facebook Marketplace bought Toomey brand carry-on size luggage. And then I have a bag that you can put over the roller handle. And then I have my Smart Heart EKG. And then I have my, if I'm doing a Skin IO exam that day, I will have my backdrop. And so I put all of that on my roller bag. So when I show up at a person's home, it's all in one handle. I travel with my butterfly ultrasound. I travel with everything I would generally need for on the fly exam. So I have a speculum. I have stuff to do procedures. I have stuff like pathology jars. I went back and tried to think of what I need on the fly in my regular practice. Great. I'm going to get a little bit of each of those to put in my kit. And so it's fitting so far, and I am mobile. So if I need anything, I can just go out to my car. But I also think about just being efficient with space and how can I use things in multiple situations and to stock more of those things than fewer.
So funny story a little bit here. You have your terrible experience with the jelly bean doctor, and it's implanted in your memory bank, and it sparked this new adventure for you in DPC. So as you're telling this story, it brings back shivers almost to me, because when I was so it would have been a 4th-year student right before I went back for residency, I was pregnant with Jackson, and I was actually 35 weeks pregnant, had just come back one day before I went into labor early and delivered. But what was funny is I worked with this doctor that he almost in those days, I know it wasn't a word to have direct primary care, but you would almost say he was pretty much a creator of DPC, but he was not the cleanly professional model we're talking about. So I'm really hoping that your card does not resemble his. But you remember, as a student, how you used to have to ride with your attendings to different locations, right? At least that's Nebraska. I don't know, maybe not Chicago and other places, but we would jump in the car because he was the nursing home director. So we'd jump in, head over there, and then we'd head over to the hospital, do hospital rounds, and we'd run back to his clinic. And really all of that is what made me love family practice. But if you looked in the back of this guy's car, along the back seat of this 4-door sedan would be like running shoes, paper patient charts, because remember, everything was paper charts, and they would be spread out all over the back seat, probably ones that he was supposed to be dictating or should have made it back in the office. There was wrappers, there was all these things, and I envisioned this because I'm thinking that was probably his idea of a home visit back in the day. So I'm thinking maybe you need like a Big Trees MD SUV with all the different slots in the back seat to organize everything. You just pull up and open the door and poof, it's all put together. I'm just envisioning, Maryal, just envisioning. But
I love it. Yeah, no, I have looked at modular storage units for the back of because we have an SUV. I will say that that is where I love adjusting. So if I was hungry on one home visit, I will make sure that I have a million bars to eat, like protein bars on the next trip. Or like I ran out of Band-Aids, I will like restock. But I streamline what I can and then extra prepare when I run out of something, and it leaves me with this, oh, don't forget that again feeling. Yeah. But it totally is. It's always a work in progress, especially because you might need spacers and inhalers at one time of the year versus you might not, you might need other materials at other times of the year. So it totally can evolve.
I think one of the burning questions I have when you do something like that is, you send your pathology and samples where? You don't have a clinic. So are you just dropping them off at their locations, or are they coming to your home to pick these up?
That's a great question. So I am so lucky in that I have spoken with my Quest rep and I have it set so that I can actually FedEx my samples. So my samples, when I take them, go to Sacramento, FedEx. And when I do pathology, the rep has me dropping them off at any accepting location for pathology that is through this particular company. So I have access to those drop-off points locally. But so pathology as well as labs are taken care of. And then we encourage people to have insurance, even though they're paying us cash for primary care. People can use their insurance to cover labs at the local phlebotomy place. So yeah, that's definitely my workaround. I don't offer, like, my patients clearly have discounted labs, but I don't offer discounted labs, discounted imaging as value propositions in my clinic. That's not too common that people value those things. And the nearest cash pay imaging center is about an hour and a half away.
Yeah, that makes sense. Again, you marketed and researched what you guys need in that area. So that was a great move there. You really, what you just elaborate on and what we've talked about in some of your credentials and introducing you, this has all really set you up for this location that you are currently living in and what you are doing now, correct? You've done the rural medicine locations and the unopposed medicine. You feel pretty well prepared for this.
Yeah, definitely. I specifically chose an unopposed program because of my love for family medicine that came out of Superior. I was so floored by how the doctors out there have taken care of generations, how a rural environment compared to the city environment was very much like a homey feeling. I'm talking to the person who lives this life every day. It's so nice to be able to go to the post office and you're standing in line. I don't find it awkward. I love it when people are showing you things that they're proud of, artwork that they've done or whatnot. And you're just like waiting for your packages to come out of the post office window. So I love that. And when I grew up in Sacramento, even though it's fairly large city, I went to a school where there was a magnet program. And I was so used to calling my friends' parents by their first names. And so I have always been in favor of that smaller environment in no matter what situation I've been in. And so when I saw rural family medicine, I was like, nope, this is my jam, not doing PT anymore. This is it right here. And yeah. So when I went to choose residency programs, I only applied to unopposed programs in California, at which point there were, I think, only 7 at the time. And then from there, during residency, I specifically created a rural curriculum. Like I made my own curriculum because I wanted to focus and train more and be confident in doing rural medicine and be prepared to do whatever. And I'm no Neil Douglas doing thyroid ultrasound biopsies, but I sure as heck will do things that some of my classmates who are my counterparts in cities will not attempt. But yeah.
That's awesome. It looks like God had a plan for you all along. So I'm glad you figured that out.
You can envision jelly beans as a good thing at the end of the day.
Absolutely, you can. I don't like jelly beans. I like dots, but I do envision them happier now at this moment than I did when you told me the story at the beginning. See, so you can always grow to love something. You can. Just find that mindfulness and awareness in that special place in your heart. But talking about special places in your heart, how are you fitting these 3 men in your life into the equation? How do you manage that kiddo jumping on the couch, the baby crying, your husband coming home as a physician as well, wanting to talk about his life of traditional medicine still. And then you're also starting your new business. So everybody has their different role and just life journey going on right now.
Ooh, that is a constant work in progress for sure, especially balancing the podcast with everything. And until I want to say the first week of November, we had 0 childcare. So that's been trying. So my husband right now is working the morning shift 5 days a week. So he's home by 1:30, and then I do my clinic in the afternoon. So my decision from the beginning was, even though I absolutely admire Dr. Lauren Hetty and I love her model of not having staff, I was like, I'm going to have staff. I have to have staff for me to keep my sanity with no childcare and this pandemic, this amazing, I say that in the most sarcastic sense, pandemic. So I always think of the idea of, I want to function at the highest level of my training, and I want to be functioning in the things that make me the most happy. So that means that I have to offload some of those responsibilities in terms of the administrative things. I don't really want to be calling to ask people to fill out their general membership agreement form or something like that. As much as we are multitaskers and I love doing everything in family medicine, I don't love overextended, never-ended Maryal. When it comes to the boys, I try to focus on them in the morning. So it's been harder because Nolan is older now. And so when he was my podcasting buddy that I could just hold during most of the first year of this podcast.
Yeah, he's already halfway through medical school. I don't know if you realize that, but he is. He's already absorbed knowledge from multi-states.
So true. So
just
true.
Saying, a brilliant child.
So he is, I definitely cannot rely on him being snuggled and cuddly and quiet the whole time anymore. I've shifted. I've definitely had to pivot, and I make sure to make time for them. And that's another reason why I chose Spruce, is because I can have all of it's like my task list. I get notifications of people who've contacted me. I set time aside during the morning, and my patients are aware of this in terms of like in our policies. I say, hey, I check the EMR the most. I check Spruce second, and we check email once a day. So if you want us, we encourage, like how you were talking about encouraging phone calls, we encourage EMR messages. But so I will set time specifically aside to have with the boys. And I try very hard not to break that unless there is an acute call. And so if there's an acute call, I will have to adjust to whatever those are, and just, hope that this pandemic gets better and that we can have childcare again. But yeah, it's been helpful, really helpful to have my mom here. But yeah, it's not a pretty answer.
Yeah. And it is true. If you have one child, 2, 5, it's always hard as a working mom or father, as well as a physician or not. It's just always hard to find that right balance, as well as doing a good job at what you love to do. So there is no right or wrong answer. It's what makes your family happy and what makes you happy. And DPC is usually what drives that for all of us, but you can fall into the same rut with DPC as you can with traditional medicine. And I think that's one thing that every DPC doctor has to really learn at the beginning. And they have to remember that if you left the system because you were burned out, you were worn out, there were no boundaries, you can't go out and recreate that very same thing in the new world that is now yours to own, because then you're just going to be sold out on DPC as well. I think that listening to that internal, okay, have I put enough time into my practice? Have I spent enough time with my kids? It's always something you're going to have to weigh out, because you don't know when that acute line is going to ring. And you're doing a good job of educating your patients when they call, because I do think they need to hear that, hey, you've done, that attaboy, hey, you've done a great job. This is exactly what you were supposed to do. This is how I can get to you quicker. This is how we can make sure you don't have to go to the ER. So I think those experiences are very important for them as well, because it's all new to them too.
Yeah. Oh, that is the comment I get at least 3 times a day. And I'm not even kidding you with that. Like, even patients who have gone through the text or the leaving a voicemail that is transcribed, they feel confident. I still get the comments from those exact patients. Like, this is all still new for us. Like, we're adjusting it. Yeah. So my virtual assistants help in terms of really onboarding my patients. And so that's one of the many functions they do. And so my patients who are unfamiliar with tech, unsure of their own skills as to how to use the tech, we literally have visits for them after they've joined the practice to help them feel confident in using the tech so that they can get a hold of us when they need to.
Yeah. And I can feel that by the avenues that you talk about. So there's no doubt that I think you have a great system for people to reach you. One of the things you mentioned was working at the top of your, just at the top of your medical level and your expertise, and always making sure that's one thing you continue to recreate and follow. So I have a question that I think that rolls through my mind often because I am a rural family med doc. So I have a pretty broad set of skills, and I like to continue keeping those up. But along with that, for me, is we have a hospital system, and I have to remain credentialed, and I have to keep numbers up. Is there any thought in your mind on 300 people? Does that worry you on keeping up skills? Because those 300 people only have so many things that they have come up, correct? And how often does it come up? And is that partly why you added in a little bit of the specialty care that you've added to your website? And out of all of those two things, do you have a passion on any of it? Is any of it your favorite?
Yeah, so wonderful question. And I actually am toying with the idea of come spring to sublease a space solely for procedures. And that would allow me to do the things like when you talk about love, I love dermatology. I love the ability to address something right when I see it. And so when I know that our community waits 6 to 8 months to get into the dermatologist sometimes, or they have to drive an hour and a half to get to the nearest dermatologist. And then some dermatologists in our region in Northern California will only take, like they will selectively say like, only if you have basal cell or worse will we see you. And it's just the lack of care. Again, this is that market research that you pointed out. Because I was practicing here for almost 6 years, I know the pain points in this community, not only from doing market research actively, but also having heard the many like, well, I can't get in. I have to drive 3 hours to see the nearest dermatologist. Like I have these pressure points or these pain points ingrained in my brain. And so I would love to just have derm clinics where this is a transparent price. Absolutely. We can bill your insurance for pathology, but for access to care, like within the same week, here you go. Like here's an option. So I'm toying with that idea right now because while I love my model of telemedicine and home visits for my core patients, I love the ability to branch out where I feel I can balance things, but also to do the things that I love, like dermatology. And I know that it's bringing value to the community.
That's awesome. So procedures are your biggest thing. And if you were to lose any other privileges or say skills, that's fine. If you lose something here or there, procedures is where you want to keep your main focus.
Yeah. And it was heartbreaking, but I no longer do colonoscopies. I went out to Superior during my 4th year residency, and I lived with Dr. Tim Blakey and his wife, Lavita, across from the hospital for 2 months. Like I left my husband to go out there for 2 months, and he took my patient panel, and I trained to do scopes nonstop in Superior. And just as I had done in medical school, but like on crack, because I was doing way more procedures, way more scopes. And I have the skills. I was trained to do that. But here, a family practice doctor is not encouraged to do procedures like colonoscopies. And so I stopped doing colonoscopies, and it stinks because I was able to get my patients in within 1 to 2 months, and patients have to wait much longer. And we're talking half a year. Or more. And so to get in for their procedures, and even worse with the pandemic, or else people will have to drive. And when you have prepped for a colonoscopy and you have to minimally drive 45 minutes, and then you have to tack another 45 on to get access to care, it's so heartbreaking. So I have given up that as a procedure, but it's like the dermatology, the circumcisions, the prenatal care, like that's exactly why I offer non-members options, and where I see that carved out in the future for my community. I mean, it's just like, I don't deliver babies anymore. I loved delivering babies, but I am not myself when I don't get sleep after multiple nights. And like, being a breastfeeding mom, it's different. Like it's the kid cries, change the baby, you feed them, they go back to sleep. It's very different than checking a strip to make sure that it's reassuring and then worrying because the mom is borderline or whatever. I prefer Maryal with more sleep than less sleep.
Yeah, I might too. I don't know. I haven't seen you sleepless, but I'm going to go with it. I'm going to agree with you. That's one of my things that I feel that is one of my passions around direct primary care is that I do hold a lot of skills and continued with a lot of my hospital privileges. And I believe that is one of the saddest parts of medicine, truly, for family physicians all over, is that the choice they're having to make, DPC or traditional care, really both physicians are forced with it right now of, do we give up skills or do we not? Like, are we too busy to continue to do colonoscopies or deliver babies, or do we need to do that and offer that to our community? Or if you're in DPC, will I have enough numbers to continue to do this, and will people want to do it without insurance? I just think it's a very difficult topic. Physicians don't want to leave the system because they don't want to give things up. And I think sometimes some of the patients don't realize what physicians give up, so they can leave the system and care for their patients in a more personal relationship. So skill set is very near and dear to my heart, just venue as far as primary care and what our mission is long-term for direct primary care. I get a lot of people that ask me about OB and performing that as a DPC physician and endometrial ablations and things like that. And at the end of the day, it's never an easy road, and it's always trying to make sure you have your numbers so you can continue your skills and do it well. And I would hope to see one day direct primary care will not have to fight so hard. What you talk about with colonoscopies and OB, I hope that one day ours is more of an elite way to continue rural family practice care, and it'll be something that people dream of doing and that continues to thrive. But we'll see how that goes. I would say with the free market changing so much, there might be a place after all for a lot of these procedures outpatient, and we won't have to weigh on the real hospital systems or larger procedural centers to have all these done. Hopefully someday, like you with your procedural center, some of these smaller ones will be able to continue care for these smaller groups going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's wonderful. Like, everyone knows the Surgery Center of Oklahoma, but now there's Wellbridge in Indianapolis. And the idea that, like, for example, the DPC Alliance Masterminds, I literally am not joking when I'm saying I'm going to go out to Blair to learn IVs from you, but that's what they did up in Hood River. Like, they learned IVs and they learned with ENSO doctors how
PRP and
you're able to, when we help each other maintain our skills, it's much easier in a community where all of us understand the importance of maintaining quality of care when we're doing these procedures. And it's just amazing when we're able to offer these with greater access. Yeah.
As we wrap everything up, I just want to touch on a few things that maybe you had mentioned and we didn't chat about, just to make sure you don't want to offer some advice or maybe things you've already learned on them. And one of them you had mentioned was finances. And is there a better way to do that, to collect fees, especially while you're doing it on your own? And then if there's any other things you can even recommend on overhead or ways to keep low overhead. I know you spoke a little bit on your mobile vaccination clinic and then also what products and tools you use to do those things. But that's the day-to-day. The finances is always a huge hit for somebody that's never done that as they embark upon a DPC career. And then something we didn't talk about because we were laughing and joking a little bit about sleepless nights and kiddos, time blocking for your schedule. So maybe about finances or time blocking, share a little bit of that before we close up.
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely would say that when I opened, I went with the cheaper option. I went with Bluefin and Serbo. I thought it would be manageable because Serbo has excellent data mining as long as you tag things appropriately. But what I found is that even with virtual assistants, we were stretched so thin with regards to getting people to address their invoices. And so now Hint is so helpful in that it has cut our time down significantly, because to become a member, you have to put either your bank information or credit card information. And it also helps us keep track on when people join the practice, when a person pays annually, when their fees are due for the next year. So that has been very helpful. I do have one-off charges for things that I offer separate from my membership fees. So like Skin.io, for example, would be something that people would get individual invoices for, and those are housed in Servo. But in terms of the membership management, Hint has definitely been crucial in us not being stretched too thin to maintain membership payment. Now, with regards to finances in general, I definitely would say I absolutely am not the poster child of keeping good books in terms of the receipts that I've spent for investing in the practice. And so that's one thing where I know it's going to be a hassle, but I know also that it will be worth it in the end of the day, because I won't look back 3 years from now saying, oh, I should have put that receipt towards my startup costs. I used QuickBooks to help me get organized there. And then whenever I purchase something, I upload everything to my cloud server so that I can, even if I forget that I bought something, I can have it there as proof of this is what I bought as part of the clinic investment. So that's something I wish I would have done much earlier than I am doing currently, but you live and learn. In terms of the time blocking. So I know people have talked about that. I've picked up on time blocking in general, but when I was doing the interview with Dr. Jalon Burton of Healthy Home Pediatrics, she mentioned specifically about time blocking for networking. And you and I can talk for days and days. It's like we're in high school, pulling an all-nighter before a Spanish exam. That is how I feel when we talk. But so when it comes to people and talking, that is one of my favorite things to do. I love networking. That is one of the things when you mentioned about how do I balance time with the boys, I set up specifically Thursday mornings at this time, I will network. And out of that time, I have to consider what am I going to give if I add a networking onto the schedule. And that was something, again, that I learned from speaking with another DPC physician that has helped me rein in my uncontrolled networking when I was like, oh yeah, let's talk right now. I definitely am grateful for the physicians who will network with me on the fly, but I definitely respect that when people say, hey, I can't talk with you until blah, 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 that I understand where they're coming from.
That's me. She's calling me out right now. No. Time blocking is tough. From a newbie perspective, I think it's amazing to start getting into that early. I started time blocking late, and I did it as a have to, not a want to. And I'm already at a point where even my have to space gets eaten up by people that really, they want to see me and maybe not Matt, my PA, or I really do want to hear about another product. So I put an admin appointment on there, and it's very easy to lose your time blocks quickly. So starting that earlier, and then knowing as you're building your practice, okay, if I take this person, then I'm going to have to eat into my time block. Then you might choose to maybe not grow for a while. That's one thing that kind of came back to bite me in the hiney, is that I kept allowing people in, but never was putting that time block out there. And now I'm trying to figure out, okay, do I really want to have patients seeing my mid-level or myself? Because you do know that people are paying for that monthly membership for you. Something has to give, right? Either you help more of your town and you have somebody help you do it, or you do need to cap. And so I think time blocking is a good way to have an idea of just how much time you have in your life. Because if you're starting to get rid of it, then you probably, need to halt on something.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you mention intentions as to why people become DPC physicians, you know this just as well as I do in terms of, again, the boys growing up so quickly. But my intention is to be able to be at those soccer games and to be able to attend plays and stuff. And so while I say my ideal is 300, the other thing I want to see too is my financial goals are achieved at that 300 number, around 250, 300. And what you're saying, checking in with yourself, your spouse, if you have a partner, your kids, making sure that you're just feeling out all aspects of your life to ask yourself, are you acting at the highest level of your training? And are you achieving the happiness that you saw yourself achieving when you opened your DPC. Yeah.
Agreed. Well, I am just very excited that I got to interview you. I feel very honored. I do. I am a Nebraska girl. You're the California. I'm the Nebraska, obviously. But I do appreciate it. And I look forward to the times that we get to travel again. And you come back here so we can teach IVs, do some PRP, microneedling, aesthetics, do some fun stuff, and teach you some more new skills.
And the whole time you're saying that, I'm like, and just give you a hug. Like, I cannot wait until I get to give you a hug in person.
I know, it's been way too long. I'm just sitting here thinking, I have to use my CME pretty soon that I want to do. I'm just thinking, maybe you and I need to hit up the next derm course. So then that way we can chat about this and the procedure ideas. So
totally.
I'm always in for meeting up.
Fantastic. I love it. Amber, thank you so much for being game to do this. It was so much fun. And I love any chance that we get to talk to each other.
Absolutely. Ditto, my love. And good luck with Big Trees MD. And you did not have to down a whole bottle of tequila to make it through your first week. So it's a win. It's a win. You have a good night. And thanks for letting me be involved.
Sounds good. Good night. Thank you.
Next season, we will be hearing from even more physicians in the DPC and direct care ecosystem. Until then, enjoy the episodes of Season 1 and make sure to leave a review, tell a friend about the pod, and subscribe so you don't miss when Season 2 drops. Until then, this is Maryal Concepcion.